spacecraft currently docked to the International Space Station as we get ready to welcome 3 new crew members aboard the orbiting laboratory. Once more, we're coming to you live from the Flight Control Room number 1, Ficker 1, the usual space station flight control room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Inside the room right now, still the Orbit 2 team, and they are being led today by Flight Director Pooja Jazrani. She's right there in the middle of your screen. She's going by the call sign of Unity Flight. She's coordinating all of the teams here in Houston, responsible for overseeing the systems on board the International Space Station. Just above her is NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins. She's serving as the Capcom for this shift. She'll be the voice communication link between our teams here in Houston and the crew on board. And just a quick update, the crew is stepping through all of their final leak checks. Following a successful docking, they kick off essentially about 2 hours of leak checks and vestibule pressurization. So they actually fill that space between the Soyuz spacecraft and the station hatch, which is normally exposed to the vacuum of space with atmosphere. And once that gets pressurized, they have to equalize that. So you have to have equal pressure in that vestibule on board the Soyuz spacecraft and on the station before you can get those hatches open, and obviously making sure there are no leaks in any of the seals between the vehicle and the spacecraft. So we're still going through those leak checks. We have a couple more minutes to go until they get some final pressure readings, and then we'll begin that equalization process, and then there's a couple of minutes on the end of that as well. We were initially targeting a hatch open time of right around 11:15 a.m. Central Time. We'll slide around with that as the pressure checks continue on. The crew on board the Soyuz spacecraft, though, are on the other side of this hatch that we're looking at right now. And they are NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy and Russian cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner. He's there on the right, Ivanishin in the center, the Soyuz commander, and on the right, or on the left, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy. And in just a couple of minutes, they're going to be joining the Expedition 62 crew on board the station with 2 NASA astronauts, Jessica Meir and Andrew Morgan, and Oleg Skropochka. They've all been on board for different times. Drew Morgan's actually been on board for about 263 days. And then Christina and Oleg have been on board for just over 197 days. They're scheduled to remain on board the station for about another week, and then they'll be coming home. And then the crew that just arrived today will be the only ones on board until we get another human space flight launch. The next one on our schedule is going to be that Demo 2 flight, currently targeted for mid to late May. And that'll be bringing Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley up to the station. But for now, we are standing by for this hatch opening. You're getting a look inside of the Poisk module, and you're going to see Oleg Skropochka, the current station commander, floating into view. He's just there at the bottom. He's been setting up the camera and getting the hatch ready on the station side. There are 2 hatches that we'll see open. First, we'll see him open the station hatch, and that'll actually reveal the very top of the Soyuz spacecraft, where we were looking at it in the vacuum of space just a few hours ago. The docking probe and the other antennas located around it. It's currently attached. The docking probe has been retracted. And then once these leak checks are complete, we'll be able to get these hatches open and the crew on board.
Copy 732. This is the ISS pressure. All right, step 10.9.3, RPV 1. Airfield regulator 1 is closed. Ivan, could you please send S5 command? Yes, please send S5 command, and then in 1 minute send S6 command. S5 issued at 19:04:45, and I confirm that LED is illuminated.
visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control Houston. Tom Erkenswick today is leading the team of flight controllers, both a support team here in Houston and over in Moscow, getting data and feedback from the Russian flight control team and feeding that to the flight controllers here in Houston in Ficker 1. Just hearing that the leak checks have been completed. Now they're beginning the pressure equalization step. So you need to make sure that you have equal pressure on both the station and the Soyuz hatch sides, and then also in that vestibule, that space in between. And then once those pressures are equal or within a tolerable range of being equal, they'll be able to actually get these hatches open. So leak checks in the rear view, equalization on board now, and following that will be hatch opening.
Open, KKC, no stop. Stand by. Okay, copy, standing by. All right, so stand by for Iss Hatch opening. All right, standing by.
And again, the first hatch we expect to be open will be on the station side. There are two hatches, one on the station, one on the Soyuz. Oleg Skropochka there in the Poist module will first open up the station side hatch. Looks like he's getting into position to start that maneuver now. And then after they finalize the pressurization, equalization between the Soyuz and the station, they'll be able to open up the Soyuz hatch. In the time since they've docked, in addition to doing all of these leak checks, the crew able to get out of their Sokol launch and entry suits that they've been wearing since suiting up prior to their launch. And there we see the station side hatch is open. And looking at the very top of the orbital module on the Soyuz now.
Irkut, this is Moscow. You go to proceed with step 9.3, the actions that are in the box. Okay, copy all, opening KKT and KVD valves. Yes, go ahead and open KKT valve and KVD as well. Okay, so we're going to repress the ISS with the air. Irkut, did you open KKT and KVD valves?
And having a quick handover, so quick transition in our audio, video, and telemetry reception with the station as we hand over between the tracking and data relay satellites that deliver all of that data from the station back down to us on the ground. You're getting split box views of the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov just outside of Moscow. They've been overseeing all of the operations from the Soyuz MS-16 vehicle today from launch all the way through this docking and now hatch opening. On the right, a look inside of Ficker 1. The Orbit 2 team still on console. They've been on board since a couple of hours before the actual docking, overseeing all the final preparations of the station. Again, Flight Director Pooja Jazrani leading the team this morning.
Please be ready to note it down, and I will tell you what the recommendation is. Okay, ready to copy now. Ready to copy? Yes. So first of all, you will have to deactivate the Soyuz. This is orbital flight ODF, page 25-38, step 4. Orbital flight 25 through 28, step 4. Yes, that's affirmative. Second item, do not deactivate the gas analyzer. Orbital flight ODF, page 36, step 4.5 is not to be executed. Orbital flight, page 36, step 4.5 is not to be executed, and the gas analyzer is not to be deactivated. That's correct. Next item, you will have to change out the cartridge in the sub, page 35, 4.3. So you're supposed to switch pair 1 with pair 3. Page 35, step 4.3, and what's next? So replace pair 1 with pair 3, is that correct? Yes. Affirmative.
So while the crew inside the Soyuz continues to step through these final equalization procedures, let's take a couple of moments. You guys have been sending in questions on Twitter using that hashtag AskNASA ever since our launch this morning. We'll try and burn through a couple here real quick. Our first one comes from Mymeria, my vet, who wanted to know what will be the first task upon boarding the International Space Station. Well, first task on board will be to just greet their crew members, and they'll gather in the Russian service module and exchange a couple of words with the teams on the ground, both in Moscow and in Houston. And then actually the first scheduled task for all of these crew members will be a midday meal. It's been several hours since the crew on the Soyuz 8 prior to getting suited up and leaving on their trip into space, and then for the crew already on board the station, it's right at midday meal time for their normal sleep schedule, so they'll all share that together, and then it'll actually move into what's known as a safety briefing. So it's customary that the International Space Station commander gives all newly arrived crews a safety briefing that typically lasts about 45 minutes, where they just do a refresher on all the particulars of reacting to an emergency on board station, where your routes are to your Soyuz spacecraft, where all the emergency equipment is, and just walking through it with all of the crew members.
Could you please?
Next question comes from Sid, who wanted to know, is this going to be the last usage of the Soyuz for space station travel? A number of you sending in questions asking if this is the last time we'll have American astronauts on a Soyuz, or will we only be flying on the new commercial spacecraft from SpaceX and Boeing? And the answer is no. This will not be the last usage. The intention is to continue to fly Americans on the Soyuz, and then also to fly Russians on the commercial crew vehicles coming online as part of our commercial crew program. We always want to maintain a U.S. and a Russian presence on board the station, as those nations are the ones most most well trained and most in tune with the various systems on the different segments. And so in order to keep that mixed crew, we're going to have to fly mixed crews on these different vehicles. So we fully intend to continue flying Americans on Soyuz and to eventually fly Russians on the U.S. commercial crew vehicles. And then a lot of people sending in the very pertinent questions about any risks of the crew spreading COVID-19 to the International Space Station, or what we've done to protect them. And the answer is we really have a very robust health stabilization program, is what it's referred to. So it's essentially a very strict quarantine for these crew members in the weeks leading up to their International Space Station flights. A couple of typical pre-launch activities were either scaled back or changed, largely ceremonial in nature, things like media briefings or visits to Red Square. But their quarantine procedures didn't really get that much of a change. The amount of individuals in the general area around the crew was scaled back. We saw with all of the rollout video of the crew leaving the hotel, there was a much smaller footprint of individuals down there in Baikonur, just due to all of the current travel restrictions. But we do have this stabilization plan already in place that requires a quarantine for these crew members, just even in normal times, to prevent them from bringing any bugs, viruses, things like that up to the space station with them, potentially getting their other crewmates sick, as they're essentially living in this closed environment. And so thanks to already having a lot of those robust procedures in place, we're very confident that we're able to launch these crew members safe and healthy and ready for their 6-month stays on board the International Space Station.
So, there are certain actions that are...
Altered Miscellany wanted to know how often they get to talk to their families. Pretty regularly, and then they'll have regularly scheduled video conferences with friends and family down here on the ground, using a lot of different communication tools that would be very familiar to you or I down here on planet Earth, essentially using video calling and even voice over IP, very similar to what we get, and it ends up functioning just like calling somebody on a cell phone. So they're able to get that on board the International Space Station. They also have access to email, so they're able to regularly send and receive messages from family on the ground, and they can do that every single day. Our next one comes from Alex. He wanted to know, how good is the internet on the International Space?
Weather-wise, we've been kind of rolling right along, but this is the day that everything comes to a screeching halt, isn't it, Keith?
Yeah, it sure is, and it's a big change. I mean, a lot of us were outside Monday, Tuesday, even yesterday, and just kind of shut in today through tonight as snow arrives for a lot of the state. Keep it interesting. Here's a look at the radar showing the precipitation spreading in from southwest to northeast. It is worth noting that the front end of this is almost all rain, as we thought would be the case, with just some snow in the higher terrain. But that will change as the secondary low develops later this afternoon and tonight. That's kind of the source, if you will, for the colder air that will change things over to snow. Hour-by-hour forecast shows the rain continuing to overspread through this early afternoon, and notice the rain-snow line by later today starts to dive towards the coastline, and when it does so, it will be a very strong and dramatic transition from rain to snowfall rates that could be 2 inches an hour. We could even see some thunder snow through the middle of, say, 5, 6, 7 o'clock tonight as the dynamics are there. And notice that rain-snow line quickly plunges all the way to the coastline over the mid-coast. A place like Portland will be a battleground, probably see some flakes, but have a hard time really accumulating. North of that, though, it is snow, and it's a heavy, wet snow through the middle of the night tonight in through early tomorrow morning before we start to wrap this storm out of here by, say, early to late morning tomorrow. It's windy behind it as well. So snowfall amounts here are going to be substantial. I'll show you those in just a second, but let's talk a minute about the winds, which will be strong. Initially, they're going to be out of the west and southwest, and then they're going to turn to the northwest as we head into tomorrow. The gusts should be around 40 miles an hour, which is south of what it would take for large power outages. However, it is worth noting, because it's a heavy wet snow, it'll weigh down branches, so the threshold there may be lower in a lot of spots. I'm looking particularly at the mid-coast and down east Maine for the possibility of those power outages, because they'll see just enough snow combined with some of the strongest winds. It stays windy through tomorrow, and then things start to settle down. So snowfall map is largely unchanged. The only small tweak that I made was that I put Lewiston in the 3 to 6 zone as opposed to 1 to 3. I think they are able to saturate and get cold enough to see that snow accumulate. 6 to 12 inches easily in the purple area. We could see amounts of 15, 16 inches over northern Maine and certainly into the mountains. And then Portland will be kind of that delineation line. South of that, likely to see almost nothing as far as the snow goes. All right, after that, the weekend looks decent. Partly cloudy to mostly sunny on Saturday and partly sunny on Sunday. Temperatures right around 50 degrees on either side of 50, especially Saturday. Still a little breezy, by the way, on Saturday. A storm system arrives on Monday. That will be nasty as well, but it will be all rain. Looks pretty mild on Tuesday, upper 50s to around 60 degrees, and then cloudy and cool on Wednesday. Guys, I gotta say, beyond just this storm, I am not a huge fan of this general pattern we have for the next 10 days, but we'll do our best to kind of make the best of it.
Okay. All right, Keith, thank you. All right, so News Center meteorologist Mike Slifer is among those volunteering from home, answering phones for our United Way telethon as well.
And it looks like somebody's talking to him right now. Do you have time to talk to us, or are you in the middle of a call, Mike?
I got time to say hi real quick.
Hi.
Make sure that if you guys are watching this, you guys take the time to call in. You never know who you're going to talk to. Some of you will get lucky and talk to some of your favorite meteorologists or your least favorite meteorologist because we're talking to snow, you know? You never know who's going to answer that phone. So make sure you give us a call, and I'm going to jump back on this call. So maybe I'll talk to you on the phone.
Very good. Sounds good, Mike. We should
Thank
mention,
you,
too,
Mike.
so again, if your calls come in during this hour, they are doubled. Our matching partner, Poland Spring, this noon. And you can also text the word Maine United, one word, to 828-6622. Again, during this hour, it is doubled. You can do that any time of day, right up and continuing.
And if you do that, if you text to 828-6622, it'll take you to a donation page.
Right.
But again, you have to make that donation within the hour of 12 to 1 in order to get it
the
doubled.
match. Yeah.
So huge thanks to everybody.
Yes, indeed, who took the time to call or go online to make a donation, including our matching donors. Again, this hour, it's Poland Spring.
We're going to take a break and be right back.
Maine's first responders and essential workers are working tirelessly through this pandemic. News Center Maine's Hannah Deneen right now brings us a story that shows our appreciation for those people on the front lines.
You're broken down and tired of living life from the go-round. And you can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out.
You know, social isolation is a concern at times like this, but Maine people are resourceful, compassionate, and we will continue to support each other.
Oh my goodness, isn't this nice? Thank you, girls.
You're loved by many.
Mainers do help Mainers, and I think that's a really important thing that we're seeing. Kind of shocked, but in a way not really, because this is Maine and we're a community.
And I'll rise up, high the waves, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times scared.
Things are likely to get worse before they get better, but they will get better. And together, we will get through this.
So the phone lines for our Maine United Telethon are now open. You can call 855-875-4328 right now to make a donation. And you can talk to our volunteers, including ones like Sharon Rose Vasnes, who's busy. We're going to hear from her in just a moment.
I'm going to start by getting...
So as we continue with our matching hour, the United Way Telethon, in just this half hour already, you've donated $18,835.
Wow.
That will be matched by Poland Spring.
Yeah, Poland Spring is doing up to $50,000 in matches, so we want to hit that goal by the end of the hour.
Great.
So
Yeah.
we wanted to check in with Sharon Rose Vasnes, who's at home taking calls this afternoon, but guess what? She's on the phone lines with one of you, so thank you very much. If you can't get through on the phone lines, you can always...
Can we talk with you, Sharon?
Are you done? Oh, she's just dancing.
You can if our caller, Patricia, would you be so kind as to hold on for 1 second?
Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, I've got Patricia on the line from Edgecombe. Thank you, Patricia. You guys, the phones have been ringing off the hook, everything from $25 donations on up to $150 donations. Every little bit helps, and with those matching funds, it's really great. It's so gratifying to hear from so many people who are just, digging in deep and wanting to help their neighbors. Mainers always represent. Mainers always come through, and we have such a great track record in this state, don't we?
Absolutely,
We do.
always. Always.
The generosity is unmatched, I think.
Yeah.
It truly is. All right, Sharon, thank you. We'll let you get back to Patricia. Patricia, thank you. So we are now halfway through our Matching Mainers hour, and we have gotten over $18,000 in donations in just the first 30 minutes of this newscast.
Yeah, so again, call in the next half hour, and your donation will be matched as well. And you can keep calling throughout the day. And we do have one more Matching Mainer hour, too. That is tonight from 5:30 through 6:30. And we'll be right back with the second half hour of news and the telethon. Welcome back to our Matching Mainers hour, everybody.
That's right. This is part of our Maine United Telethon, and we are raising money to help those in need as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic. A lot of people have lost their jobs. They need help with food and housing and things like that. 100% of your donations will go right to that. You can call 855-875-4328 right now to make a donation. But first, we got to check in with Keith Carson for a look at the forecast, which is not as bright today.
No, we kind of progressively went downhill from Monday, which is not something you hear people say very often. But Monday was the best day, Tuesday was nice, yesterday was pretty nice, and now there's this rain spreading from southwest to northeast about into the mid-coast right now. You will notice that it is almost entirely rain at the moment. That is not a forecast bust yet. That is what we anticipated. It'll be when the secondary low takes over this afternoon into tonight that we drag down some colder air and get that rain-snow line crashing towards the coastline, and it will do so pretty quickly later this afternoon. Wind gusts 20 to 25 miles an hour right now will get stronger through the late afternoon, getting to around 40 miles an hour. Winter storm warning, in effect, for the pink shaded area. That means the chance of more than 6 inches of snow. Where there's not snow over southern coastal Maine, there is a coastal flood advisory, and over down East Maine, a coastal flood warning. It actually looks like that area has the best chance of more significant flooding. Some areas could be the highest they've seen on the gauge there. So we'll talk more about the flooding risk and, of course, snowfall amounts in just a few minutes.
Well, this morning at the Maine CDC news conference, Dr. Nirav Shah reported that there have been 2 more deaths since yesterday. One, a man in his 80s from Cumberland County. The second, a woman in her 90s from Waldo County. And that brings to 16 the total number of people who have died so far in Maine.
Total number of COVID-19 cases in Maine is now up to 560. That represents an increase of 23 from yesterday. 105 people have had to be hospitalized at some point in their treatment. 202 people are considered fully recovered at this point. There are cases in every county except Piscataquis County. Still no reported cases there. And Dr. Nirav Shah also said the Maine Department of Transportation is providing him with information that shows Mainers are really staying home during this. He went over last week's traffic numbers compared to the same week last year.
On I-95 in Kittery at the Maine-New Hampshire state line, there has been a 61% reduction in traffic flow. In Portland, on I-295, right near the Fore River Parkway, there's similarly been a 62% reduction in traffic flows. Overall, across the state, traffic patterns on the interstates are down approximately 53%. There's also been a significant reduction in traffic along rural highways, but more on the lines of 30 to 40%.
Now, Dr. Shah this morning also mentioned that 17 out-of-staters actually tested positive here in Maine, and that 13 Mainers tested positive in other states.
Larry Lord, the man who is being called a hero for evacuating the offices of Leap Incorporated in Farmington just before that deadly explosion, is finally coming home.
Yeah, nice to have some positive news about this. After 7 months of recovery, Lord is expected to be released from the Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital down in Boston tomorrow. And he will be escorted, a police escort from Boston all the way home to Jay. The Lord family says they're really thankful for the huge outpouring of support, but they do ask for privacy once Larry is back home. Now, Barry's DigSafe bill, responding to the Farmington explosion, has now been signed into law. These types of laws prohibit digging around certain underground utility lines. Now, in Maine, liquid propane lines weren't previously on the prohibited list. According to findings, though, from the fire marshal, the LP line near the site of that explosion in Farmington had been damaged by digging in the vicinity. So State Representative Seth Berry of Bodenham released a statement about this passage, saying in part, quote, "These lines are dangerous and need to be carefully tended to when digging or building near them. I'm relieved we'll be making Mainers safer and potentially preventing another tragedy like Farmington."
Well, the phone lines for our Maine United telethon are now open. You can call 855-875-4328 right now to make a donation and talk to one of our volunteers like Pat Callahan. Hi there. Oh, he's on the phone. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hey.
It is clear that a whole lot of Mainers are having a hard time making ends meet right now, and perhaps you may be one of those people. So that's why we're holding this telethon right now, to try and and to help anybody who needs that help. This telethon a little different than some of the other ones we've done.
Certainly, because of social distancing, a lot of our folks are answering calls from their homes. That includes Pat Callahan, who is working the phones this afternoon. How's it going so far, Pat?
Well, it's going great, and it's a wonderful cause because this is getting right down to where the rubber meets the road. This money is going to help feed people. It's going to give money to Meals on Wheels. It can supply diapers for a family who can't afford to buy them right now because they're out of work. So the money you donate today is really going to make a huge difference in the lives of your neighbors. So we look forward to hearing from your calls or donating with the online link. So Thanks so much.
All right, thanks a lot, Pat. The COVID-19 pandemic, it really is a 1-2 punch for food pantries. More people need food, but at the same time, the donations are just really not coming in.
Yeah, the problem is acute for the folks at Trinity Jubilee Center in Lewiston.
The people in need in the Lewiston-Auburn area know they can count on the Trinity Jubilee Center. It's a soup kitchen and food pantry, day shelter, free medical clinic. The center generally guides them to the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel, but right now that light is even harder to see. Executive Director Aaron Reed says since the pandemic started, they've been handing out 1,000 bagged lunches a week.
Our biggest need right now is food, mostly sandwich supplies like jelly, peanut butter, chicken, tuna.
Have you seen a lot more people come through your doors, or maybe not through your doors, but to you because they've recently been put on unemployment, lost their jobs?
Yeah, our food pantry had over 20 new families just last week. There's a lot of people struggling to feed their kids, a lot of people out of work. On top of that, food pantries and soup kitchens in our community are shutting down, so there's even more people coming to us looking for food.
And getting their hands on that food is so much harder now. Hannaford and Bates College provide most of their donated food. Hannaford is running low on leftovers right now, and the Bates College cafeterias, of course, are closed. Plus, every year the center raises about $6,000 during its big fundraiser, but that, of course, has been canceled this year. So you can see they need our help now more than ever.
Now we should mention, while some Hannaford stores have been running low on leftovers, as I said, the grocery company is stepping up big time to help monetarily. Hannaford just announced this week a $750,000 donation to organizations fighting hunger and homelessness throughout the Northeast. Maine organizations will receive $225,000 of that.
Well, obviously the story is the late season snow, but there is some coastal flooding and some wind gusts to worry about. We'll talk about it in just a minute.
activity right now? What are you hearing that people are really